What is reversing entries? Reversing entries are made on the first day of accounting period to remove accrual adjusting entries that were made at the end of the previous accounting period. Actually guys, this step is optional. Kaning reversing entries mag-form ta sa ni if magbuhat og bagong accounting period. For example, October na ta. So mag-start ta sa reversing entries pero part ra gihapon siya sa previous period. So mao na siya ang last step. Mao na ang gitawag siya og last step ang reversing entries. So ang atong i-reverse is ang mga journal entries, as in literal na reverse or pagbaliktad. Pero not all journal entries ma-reverse. Ang reversing entries kay buhaton ni siya sa usa ka adjusting entries nga nagpuno og asset o liability account. And therefore, all accruals are reversed but only deferrals initially recorded in income statement or income expense. What are the benefits of using reversing entries? Reversing entries greatly reduces the chance of double counting revenues and or expenses. So, kaning reversing entries kuno is kanang maka-prevent misda or makapagamay kanang makuan ganing maprotektahan ka ng madubol ang account. So makatabang ning reversing entries para nang usara gud ang imo mabuhat ba dili ka magsayang-sayang malipat ka nga maduha imo mabuhat. So kung duha imo mabuhat di maalkansi ka dili makuha ang sakto nga imo pag-compute.
Good day everyone, I am Mary Tada Gonzalez and I am from Group 3 and I am going to discuss the reversing entries. So example of reversing entries. To illustrate reversing entries, let's assume that a retailer uses a temporary employment agency service to provide workers from December 15 to December 29. So, what is temporary employment agency service? Okay, so temporary employment service, amo ni ang mga person nga nagkuha or maghatag or sa usa ka kliyente o sa iba pa nga mga tao nga naghatag og serbisyo o nagtrabaho lag para sa kliyente. Okay, so the temp agency will bill the retailer on January 6 and the retailer is required to pay the invoice by January 10. Okay, so what is invoice? So invoice is a document that maintains a record transaction between a buyer and seller, such as paper received from a store or online record from an e-tailer. Invoices are a critical element of accounting, internal controls, and audits. So, ang invoice kaya para sa mga resibo, mga samsana. So the temp agency will bill the retailer on January 6 and the retailer is required to pay the invoice by January 10. So singlon kuno or sukton sa temp agency ang retailer iga January 6 o kinahanglan bazaran sa retailer ang invoice sa dili pa mag January 10. So assuming that retailer's accounting year ends on December 31, the retailer will make an accrual adjusting entry on December 31 for the estimated amount. Okay, so ibutang natin nga ang accounting year sa retailer kay mahuman ini ka December 31. So ang retailer kay magbuhat ng accrual adjusting entries sa December 31 para sa estimated amount. So if the estimated amount is 18,000, the retailer will debit temp service expense for 18,000 and will credit accrued expenses payable for 18,000. Okay, so kung ang estimated amount kuno kay 18,000, then i-debit na sa retailer ang temp service expense para sa 18,000. Okay, so then ang credit, which is accrued expenses payable kay 18,000 gihapon. Okay, so ano nga adjusting entry kay it assures that the retailer's income statement for the period ended December 31 will report the 18,000 expense and its balance sheets as of December 31 will report the 18,000 liability. Okay, so igaman sa financial statement, for example, maman ang financial statement, so the closing entries will transfer the balance in the account temp service expense to an owner's or stockholder's equity account. So kung maman ako ng financial statement already na, kaya ang closing entries ko no, kaya i-transfer ko na ang balance sa account sa temp service expense ngadto sa owner or sa stockholder equity account. Okay, so as a result, so the temp service expense will begin January with a zero balance. So resulta ko na nga ang account ko na sa temp service expense kay magsugod sa January pero zero balance na. Okay, so when a reversing entry is recorded as of January 1, it simply removes the estimated amounts contained in the December 31 accrual adjusting entry. In other words, the January 1 reversing entry will okay, so ang reversing entry kung reversing entry kuno kay ma-record na as of January 1, mawaan po din ako no dili na ako ng estimated amount nga nag-contain sa pag December 31 ng accrual adjusting entry. So what is accrual adjusting entry? Okay, so it is a journal entry recorded at the end of a reporting period that alters the amount of revenues or expenses recorded in the income statement. Okay, so in other words, the January 1 reversing entry will so debit accrued expenses payable for 18,000 and credit temp service expense for 18,000. Okay, so what is accrued expense payable? Okay, these are the obligations that a business has recorded, so for which no invoices have you been received from supplies, and accrued expense payable is recorded with a reversing journal entry, which automatically reverses in the following reporting period. Okay, so ganina ang debit is temp service expense man, which is 18,000, and then ang credit kay accrued expense payable. So ganina na kay kuan man estimated amount pa man to sa December 31. Then sara kay kuan naman anang na-record naman ang reversing entry sa January 1, so ang debit na is accrued expense payable for 18,000 and credit temp service expense for 18,000. So after the January 1 reversing entry, the account accrued expenses payable will have a zero balance, and the account temp service expense will have an unusual credit balance of 18,000. So ikaman ko na sa January 1 reversing entry, ang account ko nga accrued expense payable kay zero balance na. But ang account sa temp service expense kaya lagyan ko sa unusual credit balance nga 18,000. Okay, so when the temp agency's invoice dated January 6 arrives, the retailer can simply debit the invoice amount to temp service expense and credit accounts payable, which is the normal routine procedure. So if the actual invoice is 18,000, the balance in temp service expense will change from a credit balance of 18,000 to a balance of 0. So 0 is the correct expense for the new accounting period, since the 18,000 had been reported as an expense in the previous accounting period. So thanks to the reversing entry, because a person paying the retailer's bills can do what is done for any other vendor invoice. Okay, so if the invoice amount on January 6 had been 18,250, the entire amount would be debited to temp service expense and credited to accounts payable. So kung ang invoice amount kuno sa January 6 kay 18,250, ang tibok kuno sa ang amount kay i-debit ngadto sa temp service expense o i-credit ngadto sa accounts payable. So the resulting debit balance of 250 in temp service expense will be reported as a January expense. So ang debit balance ko nga 250 sa temp service expense kay punto ko na i-report sa January nga expense. So since the 250 is significant difference from an estimated amount, it is acceptable to report the 250 as a January expense instead of December expense. So since ang 250 ko kay importante ko na nga difference nga sa estimated amount, but it is acceptable ko nga i-report ko na ang punto ko na i-report ang 250 sa January nga expense, dili ko sa December expense. Okay, so that would be all for my discussion for this presentation. I hope you learned something about it. Thank you so much for listening, and good day everyone.